England fans have been involved in major disorder since the 1970s. They've been more involved, more frequently, in worse incidents than any other European fan group over a longer period. How would you explain this? Is it unique? First thing to note here is that hooliganism is not new. In ancient Rome, the chariot fans organised themselves into supporter groups, greens and blues, who used to fight with each other on the streets of Rome. And indeed, in 532 AD, greens and blues fought each other in Constantinople in a major riot, which caused 30,000 deaths and the burning of half the city. Historically, England fans are not unique. What then explains their rise? What explains their behaviour and practices? We need to look back to the 1960s to see this. At this time, young groups of men, mainly from the urban working class, started to gather on terraces at the end of goals in English clubs and began to engage in intimidatory and finally violent action. We saw the emergence of mass hooliganism in England. Very similar patterns took place in Europe. They were slightly later. In the 1970s, we see across Italy, France, Germany and Spain the emergence of the ultra movement. The ultra movement was very similar to the British terrorist movement, in which were contained very significant elements of violent fans. So the England fans were not unique in that sense. There is one important point to make, however. The England fans almost always were apolitical in their orientation. Violence was fun for them, and that was the end of it. In Europe, that's not the case. Especially in Italy and Spain, the violent gangs were linked up with political groups to the right and left, often to the extreme right and to the extreme left, and were engaged in local politics. And this is significant in understanding some of the violence in Europe today. The English fans travel in extremely large numbers, much larger than any fan group. The very fact that fandom, supporting, is an apolitical act means that it attracts large followings of young people and particularly young men. Demographically, English fans following England are hugely exposed and at hugely more risk of engaging in violence than any other fan groups. This is not because they're worse people or more violent than other European fans, it's simply there's more of them. Final point, will it ever end? Is it possible to eliminate English hooliganism? No. Why? Because hooliganism is a manifestation of urban culture in the late 20th and early 21st century. It is deeply ingrained into the social fabric of not only Britain, but Europe. And therefore, it will continue as long as that urban fabric continues to exist, which we hope will be for decades.